All right. Well, it's time, and I'm going to start out by just reminding everybody that we are live streaming this. I take no credit for that whatsoever. Um, Ben Hall here, who has a fair amount of gray in his beard, but he's still young enough to know how to do all this digital stuff. Gets 100% of the credit for live streaming this and pretty much setting up this whole thing here today. I did want to mention at least that Sheriff Klatt did offer to be here this morning, but I just got a text from him that said something came up. He won't be able to be here, but he's willing to answer any questions we may have if we jot them down and get them to him. Let's see, I don't think there's any other housekeeping issues, so we can get right into it. This is the second session that we've had. Well, this volume is really loud. We're on the second session of a series of public forums that I intend to hold to go over the plans for Holiday Island for the future as we transition things from the Suburban Improvement District over to the city. How we do policing in Holiday Island isn't directly related to any of those transitions because the city is already responsible for, providing. But they tie together long-term in how the city would probably have to structure things in order to be able to take over the fire department in conjunction with the policing. So we'll go over that this morning. So this is session 2. In session 1, that was presented on the 2nd of May. We presented a feasibility study on what it would take for the city to assume all of the services currently provided by the Suburban Improvement District. In this session, a question will be posed: is there interest in and support for Holiday Island having a police department? As I say on the slide here, I remember my teachers in school always starting a class by saying, let's review what we did yesterday. By doing so, students that missed the previous session were somewhat brought up to speed. Plus, it reinforced the important factors leading up to the current topic. So let's review. In the 5-6 discussion, we talked about the prospects of the Suburban Improvement District. We talked about current levels of spending. We talked about budgets for cities of comparable size to Holiday Island. We talked about sources of revenue, and we talked about a future city feasibility budget. As far as prospects for suburban improvement districts, the point we tried to make is that the prospects aren't good, that Horseshoe Bend, Cherokee Village, and Ozark Acres have already exhausted their assessed benefits and can no longer levy annual assessments to maintain their infrastructure. So they're having to most of them have already basically completed their transition to where the city is doing everything. Cherokee Village is still on the tail end of doing that. Diamond Head, which is in the southern part of the state down by Hot Springs, is a POA as opposed to a suburban improvement district, but nevertheless, they recently incorporated because of issues they were having with the developer. So all of these small developments are kind of needing to phase out and be replaced with more traditional forms of government. Under the, we looked at the current costs of operating Holiday Island. The current city budget is about 637,000, a big portion of which goes towards the fire department and the sheriff's contract and streets and roads. And then the HICID budget, which is about 4.3 million, and you can see how that breaks down on there. So together, it's about a $5 million operation just on the expense side. Then you also have to make capital improvements. You have to replace your equipment and maintain your buildings and your roads and stuff like that. So the capital budget for HICID and the city this year, the city budgeted 573,000 for road resurfacing. We've already spent 440,000 of that approximately by resurfacing 7 miles of road that was done just very recently. And if you live on Summit, we realized that there's a problem on Summit. For some reason, it ended up kind of washboardy, and we're getting the contractor back to deal with that. On the HICID side, they had budgeted almost $1.2 million in capital improvements. So if you add the capital improvements and the operating expense together, it takes about $6.1 million to run Holiday Island. We talked about cities of comparable size, West Fork being one of them. It's a small town. It's kind of a community or a bedroom community to Fayetteville on the south side. Their annual budget is about $4.5 million. Green Forest, which we all know where that is, their annual budget's about $4.5 million. So why is there such a big difference? And we talked about the fact that we're very spread out here and there's a cost associated with that. Most of us here are retired and or retirement age, which means we have fewer people that are willing to or able to volunteer to do things. And we have above average recreational amenities. We talked about revenue sources for cities in Arkansas and how limited they are. One source of revenue is sales tax, which must be approved by voters. We talked about property tax, which is limited to 5 mils of the assessed property value, or 25 mils times 20% of your assessed property value. We talked about fuel tax terms that we get from the state, which interestingly enough are running slightly behind last year, and we really don't know why, but I mean, it's not terrible, but you would think with with the economy and everything that the tax revenue would be pretty steady. Franchise fees is another source of revenue, which most cities have franchise fees on different things. And then fees for services like selling water, sanitation fees, and use of recreational facilities. And then there's special purpose districts where the city can charge fees. If you did not attend, that's what we covered the last time, and if you did not attend the workshop on, I said May 6th in one of the slides, it was actually May 2nd. If you did not attend that workshop, you can view it on the city website, cityofholidayisland.com, and hit the About Contact tab, select services, and click on feasibility presentation, and you can view the entire presentation. A lot of good information in there. And now for the new stuff, police and fire protection. What we're going to be looking at here over the next couple of months is trying to turn a feasibility study into a plan. Step one would be to decide if we're going to keep doing things the same way or make some changes. And step two would be to determine our support to provide the funding. What is the city's responsibility for safeguarding our people and our property? This comes right out of Arkansas statutes, responsibilities for cities of a second class to provide law enforcement services for the city and its inhabitants in a manner that will most effectively preserve the peace of the city, secure the citizens from personal violence, and safeguard their property. So that's what we're required to do by statute. But there's some options in how we do that. Per Arkansas Statute 1452-102, a city of the second class may establish a police department. We don't have to, but we can if we want to. Per 1452-101, a city of the first class, on the other hand, shall establish a police department. Big difference between the term may and shall when you read statutes. But also per the statutes governing the governing body of the city of the first or second class can enter into an agreement for providing law enforcement services with an existing enforcement agency in lieu of establishing a police department. Some cities do like we do. They contract with the county, and some small towns or cities contract with a neighboring larger city to provide their police protection. What is not an option is important. It's not an option to do nothing. A second-class city in Arkansas can choose to let the county sheriff handle law enforcement instead of creating its own police department, as long as it formally contracts with or has an agreement with the sheriff's office to provide those services. The current situation, currently the city contracts with the Carroll County Sheriff's Department to provide 2 full-time deputies or the equivalent of 80 hours per week to patrol Holiday Island. But due to staffing shortages and other reasons, the county can typically only provide 55 to 70 hours per week. And this is, a lot of what I'm going to be saying here in the next couple of slides directly impact or reflect on the county. And I want to say here up front and very clearly and unequivocally that the city has an excellent relationship with the Sheriff's Department. They support us, as best they can. They do a lot of good for us. However, as you'll see in these following slides, they have their challenges too. But I am in no way am being critical, trying to be critical of the Sheriff's Department. They do a great job. Due to staffing shortages and other reasons, the county can typically only provide 55 to 70 hours per week of coverage. The city pays the Sheriff's Department $31.28 per hour for the patrol hours reported. The annual cost to the city for 2 full-time deputies is $130,125. Now that's if we got the full 80 hours a week of coverage. Most of the time, we only pay for the hours that they bill us. We get a bill every month from the county. They show us how many hours they patrolled. We pay $31.28 an hour to get those patrol hours. The current contract expired. It actually expired at the end of last year, but we got a 1-year extension on the contract that expires at the end of this year. So a new contract is going to be required if we stay with the county, and a new contract may require the city to provide a patrol vehicle, as was done at the onset of the original contract, plus the hourly rate is almost certain to increase. I talked to Jack Deaton yesterday, who's still a JP with the county and approves. He's actually on committee, so he knows pretty much what things cost here. The $31.28 that we're paying per hour basically covers the wages and benefits for the deputy. Practically nothing for the vehicle, the equipment, the fuel, the maintenance of the patrol vehicle, jailing people, dispatch, all of that stuff. We're basically not paying anything for. And the car that we provided to the county at the onset of our contract 3.5 years ago has long since worn out, and they haven't asked us to replace it. So we're getting a good deal from the county. But I would expect that that would change considerably in a new contract. So 9 reasons why Holiday Island might choose a police department over a deputy contract. Jurisdiction and service needs. A police department's authority extends to the city's boundaries. Officers patrol streets, respond to 911 calls, and investigate crimes within the city. A sheriff's authority covers the entire county, including rural areas, unincorporated towns, and county facilities. Since the city's needs are patrolling urban or suburban streets and local crime, it may prefer a dedicated department for faster and more targeted response. Another reason might be the cost and resource allocation. While contracting with the sheriff will save money, there is value in creating and maintaining our own department. This can include direct control over budgets, staffing, and equipment. But most importantly, avoiding the need to share resources with the county. Under today's arrangement with the county, the needs of the county take priority historically, which means that the city does not get the desired number of patrol hours. Now, in defense of the county, when it comes to how many deputies they can provide out here, they're practically always shorthanded. The county historically, the county doesn't pay the, top wages for deputies. So, historically, the county has kind of been the training ground for candidates to get their training and get some experience, and then go to Bentonville or something and get $2 an hour more or something like that. So there's a lot of turnover in the sheriff's department. They're, like I said, they're almost always shorthanded. Cost versus coverage. Contracting for 80 hours per week of patrol, even when the county can provide the full contracted hours, leaves the city dependent on the county for response to 911 calls over 50% of the time. If a deputy is not on duty in Holiday Island and a 911 response is needed, the nearest deputy could be 40 miles away and responding to another emergency, thus preventing him or her from responding. This doesn't happen all the time, but I know it does happen at times where something happens out here, we need a deputy, and it could take 40, 45 minutes for a deputy to actually show up out here. Carroll County is an extremely large county land-wise. I mean, I don't know how we rank compared to other counties, but if you do a lot of driving around and you pay attention to where the county limits are based on the signs, entering Carroll County or entering some other county, I mean, it goes all the way from Alpena to halfway to Rogers and all the way down to, almost to Huntsville, and north to the state line. If there's only 2 or 3 deputies on duty patrolling in the county, which is probably, I don't know what the average is, but I'm guessing that it's probably not more than 2 or 3 at any given time. They could be a long, long ways away from here. Community control. A police chief is appointed by the city's governing body, the city council, giving the city more direct control over hiring policies and community relations. This can be important for maintaining local priorities and accountability to residents. Specialized or unique needs. This is, I think, an important one. Holiday Island has a unique challenge of having 71 miles of road with dozens of isolated homes. The isolated nature of these areas makes those residents more vulnerable to crime, the properties more likely to house criminal activity, and harder to get to in case of emergency. Having the situational awareness that comes with a dedicated permanent police force, I think would be a great advantage. Traffic. This is probably the one that seems to be the most important to the people in Holiday Island here. Writing a speeding ticket now and again is a great deterrent to speeding, but knowing that your chances of getting caught are slim to none is also an incentive to ignore the speed limits. Having more staff doing more patrolling significantly reduces the incentive to speed. This is probably, when it comes to policing, this is probably what I get the most calls about. And it's almost primarily Holiday Island Drive. People that live on Holiday Island Drive that have to walk across the road to get to their mailbox, or they have to back out of their driveway onto Holiday Island Drive or something, feel like they have to grit their teeth every time they get ready to do something. I got a call, today is Saturday, it must have been Thursday morning, from a lady that lives on Holiday Island Drive. Her husband was going across the road to get their mail in the morning. Some guy came, flying through. They said, 50, 60 miles an hour. It was probably 40, 45 miles an hour, but still way too fast. And when the guy gestured to the driver how displeased he was having to dodge him going across the road, the guy apparently, slowed down or stopped and rolled down the window and cussed him out, and like he had no right to expect people to be driving the speed limit. I know my wife was out working in the yard earlier this week, and some car flew through, probably going, 45 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. It happens frequently, but if you're a police officer, you would be sympathetic to the fact that you may have to sit there for hours with your radar gun to catch that one person coming through at 50 miles an hour. So it takes a lot of patrol hours to catch probably one or two speeders. So if you're going to really have traffic control, you need more people out there monitoring what's going on. The one or two deputies that we have on patrol here at any one given time can't dedicate 100% of their time to sitting, in parking lots trying to catch speeders. Revenue. While the city should not use fines as a source of revenue to operate the city, revenue from fines is a proper way for the cost of providing law enforcement to be borne by those breaking the law, at least in part. Today, any fine revenue generated from traffic violations or criminal prosecution goes to the county. If we had a police department, that revenue would come back to the city. And, looking at budgets from other cities, I'm guessing Eureka Springs, if I remember correctly, they probably get about $50,000 a year in fine revenue. We get nothing, basically, for practical purposes. Assistance with code enforcement. By law, the sheriff's department cannot enforce code or city ordinances. And that's a kind of a biggie for us. Let me say that again. By law, the sheriff's department cannot enforce city ordinances. Code enforcement officers can at times be operating in potentially dangerous areas with potentially dangerous people. A police officer could assist in code enforcement and are trained and equipped to operate these types of potentially dangerous situations. In some cities, maybe not all cities, but in some cities, code enforcement is actually part of the police department. Community connection and involvement. Historically, the Holiday Island community has had a great relationship with the fire department. The fire chief has always been well known and liked in the community, as are the firefighters. And even though the deputies that serve Holiday Island are great, talented professionals, as is Sheriff Klatt, it is not likely that the Sheriff's Department can develop the same community connection that a stable police force would. I can't say enough for Micah, our deputy out here. She is fantastic as far as um, um, identifying where the criminal activity is going on in Holiday Island, doing something about it, being a real advocate for the community. However, she doesn't live here. She lives over by Harrison and has limited time and limited opportunity to really interact with the public and become part of the community. So I think a permanent police force, I think, could improve that. In summary, there are many benefits to Holiday Island having its own police department, but it comes with a price tag. The community must make a decision if they want to take the next step. This is the report that we get from the county every month that goes along with their bill. I don't remember which month this is, but you can see, it's kind of small print, but you can see that like the first week of the month, Micah was here for 10 hours a day for 4 days. And then a couple other deputies were here a couple hours. And, for the whole month, we got 183 hours of coverage. That's kind of typical. In a typical month, we have no coverage 9 days a month, meaning the second deputy isn't available and Micah is on vacation or training or something like that. The 6 days a month, we have less than 3 hours a day of coverage. 16 days a month, we have 10 to 13 hours of coverage. So that would be days when Micah either works a little extra or somebody else is here. And then greater than 13 hours, no days. 13 hours a day is the max that we ever see. In the slide that I just showed you, there was 183 hours billed to the city. In that time period, there was 744 hours, 24/7 hours in the month. So we got coverage 25% of the time. The other 75% of the time, we were dependent on somebody calling 911 if they needed a deputy, and we would have to wait for somebody to respond. If we had our own small police department with 3 full-time officers, we could cover about 70% of the time. But there would be gaps in that, where we wouldn't have that much coverage because of things like vacation, illness, training. I don't remember what the number is, but there's a tremendous number of hours a year that a policeman and a fireman or a sheriff's deputy have to spend in training. And of course, that you still pay them while they're in training, but you don't have coverage during that time. So what does AI say we need? For a town of about 2,500 residents, National data shows that small departments under 2,500 people, towns of fewer than 2,500 people, they average roughly 3.8 sworn officers per 1,000 residents. This is higher than the national average of 2.4 per 1,000 because small agencies must maintain a minimum number of officers to cover shifts around the clock, even with low call volumes. So even if you're a small town, if you're going to cover that town 24/7, you need the same number of officers as if you were a city of 2 or 3 times that size. So if we had 4 full-time officers and 1 part-time officer, we could cover 24/7 with still having some gaps for vacation and training. But a larger department obviously helps with the 24/7 coverage. So what are the startup costs? If we did want to move forward and have our own police department, right now we don't have anything, so we'd have to equip a police department. I pulled these numbers from looking at budgets from other cities and doing some internet research. And it looks to me that it would take about $283,000 to set up a 4-person police department. That, big parts of the cost would be purchasing the vehicles, and then equipping the vehicles. A patrol car today runs about $60,000 by the time you get the vehicle set up with everything it needs to be a police car. You buy a basic vehicle for $50,000 or $60,000, but then you have to send it off and have the crash bars put on the front and the roll cage put inside and the sirens and the radios and the computers and painting the police department on it and everything else. So it runs close to $60,000, I think, by the time you get a patrol vehicle ready to put on the street. And then there's all the other expense of equipping the officers with weapons and things like that. So by the time you're done, you have about $283,000 invested. Employee cost, and I have these numbers from, again, from looking at other city budgets, plus looking at the annual salary survey that the Municipal League does. A police chief would cost about $67,000 in salary, $23,000 in benefits. A captain, $59,000 in salary, $20,000 in benefits. And then patrol officers would be about $45,000 in salary plus $15,000 in benefits. Now, this is just an example. There's nothing written in stone that says that a police department in a small town has to have a police chief and a captain. Some towns just have a captain. They don't call anybody the chief of police. The captain runs the department, or they may have a chief of police but no captain. They just have the police chief and patrol officers and things like that. So there could be some flexibility in these numbers, but generally speaking, by the time you equip or staff the police department, you're looking at close to $250,000 a year in salary plus benefits, or about $332,000 a year. So it's not cheap. It's not cheap. I'll say that right up front. I said in one of the early slides, cost associated with it. Virtually, in most small cities, the police department is over half of their budget. And yet there's several cities in Arkansas as small as 800 or 900 people, police department. So they feel that it's worth that much. Operating cost, I figure would be about $76,000 a year. Now, if Sheriff Platt were here, he may look at that number and say, you're real light on that number. I don't know. Again, I got this by looking at budgets from other smaller communities, and it seemed like that's about what they were spending. So if you look at the total cost, again, there's operating expense plus there's capital spending because you have to put money aside to replace your patrol vehicles as they wear out. So the total annual budget to operate a police department is probably right at $500,000. So police and fire, for purposes of planning, the assumption being made by me, basically at this point, is that Holiday Island Suburban Improvement District wishes to transition the operation of the fire department to the city. I think that's a safe assumption. The city already provides policing coverage by contracting with the sheriff's department. Whether we stay with the deputy contract or form a police department, the city would create a Department of Public Safety that would encompass the police department or whatever policing activity we have and the fire department. So that's how these kind of tie together with transitioning things from the Suburban Improvement District. A theoretical Department of Public Safety, the city would form a Department of Public Safety Urban Service District, which would include the police department or sheriff contract option, include the fire department, include code enforcement. Registered voters in Holiday Island would have to submit a petition to the city council to pass an ordinance to establish the urban service district. The district would report to the mayor like a normal city department, so it's totally different from the Suburban Improvement District. There's no connection or similarity between the two at all organizationally. There's the monthly fee is calculated, is included on the water bill, and this is all per Arkansas statute. The fee is fixed for 10 years. That's an important consideration. And the district must be reauthorized after 10 years with another petition. So every 10 years, you have an opportunity to change your mind about what you want to do as a city. Fees collected must go into the Urban Service District Fund and cannot be used for any other city purposes. So public safety feasibility budget, this combines the police force and the fire department. We would be looking at an expense budget of about $1.3 million. This includes what I just showed about the theoretical budget for a police department, plus the existing budget to operate the Holiday Island Fire Department. So, but like I said, whatever fee that is established in year one can't be changed for 10 years. So you have to anticipate what your costs are going to be over a 10-year period and basically over collect a little bit in the first 5 years of that 10-year period so that you have some reserve funds to live off of in the second half of that 10-year period. So if you take the $1,316,000 estimated cost to operate the urban service district, and you spread that out over 10 years with 3%, assuming 3% annual inflation, the average for 10 years ends up being $1,526,000 basically for that 10-year period. So that's the number that, let me go back. Now, out of that $1,526,000, not all of that has to come from the urban service district fee that goes on the water bill, because there are other sources of revenue for the urban service district. Though there would be fine revenue. The fire department would get some revenue from the rural fire district. And then there's always donations and things like that. So you don't need all $1.5 million coming from the fee. I would estimate that if we went with the police department, the annual fee revenue would have to be $1,461,000. There's since it goes on the water bill, you know, we know how many water bill accounts we have here. So there would be 1,645 approximately billable units. So the monthly fee would be $74. If we went with a deputy contract, assuming a contract similar to today's, that monthly fee would be $53 a month. So, like I said, it's not cheap, but it's the price of covering us with police and fire protection. Funding the startup cost. The startup cost for a police department is estimated to be between $280,000 and $300,000. The difference in cost between a full year of a police department and the sheriff's contract is estimated to be $357,000. The plan would be to extend the deputy contract through the first year of their urban service district operation and use the cost difference to fund the startup of the police department. So we wouldn't have to borrow money or anything like that to fund the initial investment. So why do we need an urban service district with a fee when other cities don't? Well, one reason is most cities have a sales tax base sufficient to support police, fire, and many other services. Let's take a look at sales tax. And for those that were here on the 2nd of May, some of this may look familiar to you because I borrowed some of this from the first presentation. Cities in Arkansas generate much of their revenue, generally well over half, from sales tax. The next slide shows sales tax revenue for several small cities in Arkansas. As you'll see, the average annual revenue per person per 1% of tax is $239. So here's some examples. I think the one that I pointed out before were like Green Forest, who is our close. They get about $205 per person per percent of sales tax, and they have a 2.25% sales tax. So their monthly revenue is about $126,000 from sales tax, and they annually get about $1.5 million from sales tax, and that's here in Carroll County. It's noteworthy that most counties in Arkansas, most counties have a higher sales tax, countywide sales tax in Arkansas. The average statewide is 1.8%. Carroll County has a 0.5% sales tax. Most counties in Arkansas, maybe 80%, share that sales tax revenue with the cities. Carroll County does not, and that was a condition of getting the 0.5-cent sales tax passed, which was passed in order to build the new jail and pay for the operation of the sheriff's department and the dispatch. So the cities in Carroll County don't get any of the sales tax money in exchange for not having to pay for housing prisoners or paying for dispatch. So they don't pay for the jail, they don't pay for the dispatch, but they also don't get their share of the sales tax that covers those things. So that puts, the cities in Carroll County in a kind of a hole compared to what a normal city in the state would be. Um, some examples would be like Hoxie over on the eastern part of the state. They get $26,000 a month from the county in sales tax money. So for most cities, it's a significant source of their revenue. But I said that was a typical city in Arkansas. Are we typical? Cherokee Village and Horseshoe Bend are significantly less at only about $80 per person per percent of sales tax. Why? Because sales tax dollars go to the cities where people are spending their money. In organic cities, the population is primarily homegrown residents who are raising their families there, do their shopping there, eat in their restaurants. They send their kids to the school there, they buy most everything they need there, and are possibly a hub of a rural area like the county seat or something like that, which brings a lot of people in. Horseshoe Bend and Cherokee Village, on the other hand, just like Holiday Island, were created by developers for retirement living. The population's primarily retired. All three cities are within 20 minutes of a Walmart in another city and within an hour from a major city where residents go and spend their money. They only buy the necessities local or online. Some only live here in Holiday Island and in Horseshoe Bend and Cherokee Village also. People have summer homes there, but they don't live there year round. We have quite a bit of that here in Holiday Island where people don't live here full time. And then Holiday Island has the added disadvantage of being 5 miles away from a tourist town with over 70 places to eat and be entertained. You can see where the sales tax goes in our community just by following Facebook, because every weekend you'll see posts of, had a great time at Wanderoo, or had a great time at the Odd, or had a great time doing this or that, always in Eureka Springs. And, if people need groceries, they jump in their car and they drive to Berryville and go to Walmart. And while they're there, gas is a little cheaper at the gas station by Walmart, so they fill up their tank with gas. Or maybe they had a doctor's appointment in Rogers, so while they're there, they stop at Sam's and buy all their groceries and then run over to Lowe's and get all of the hardware stuff they need. And then they stop at their favorite restaurant to eat, and then they come back to Holiday Island. And, so who's getting the sales tax money? Berryville, Eureka Springs, Rogers, Bentonville, not Holiday Island. So it's not good. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the reality of the situation. Holiday Island sales tax potential. In 2020, the 2020 census population for Holiday Island is 2,399, which is our official population right now. However, more recent population estimates puts our population at 2,452. It would seem to be a reasonable number to use for estimating sales tax potential. Using a population of 2,452 and a sales tax yield of $82 per person per percent of tax, a 2.5% sales tax would yield about $502,000. Now we have real reservations about that number because we're not quite sure how the merchants know what the correct sales tax is to be charging. Not locally. Any business in Holiday Island would know what sales tax they're going to be charging. But if you go to, let's say you go to Metro Appliance in Springdale and you buy a refrigerator that you want delivered here, well, the sales tax is supposed to be on where it's delivered to. So they would have to look up what's the sales tax in Holiday Island. Well, they might pull up 72631 as the zip code for Holiday Island. It may pop up in their system as being Eureka Springs. They'll charge the Eureka Springs sales tax if you don't catch it. And the sales tax money you're paying will go to Eureka Springs, not to Holiday Island. We have real concerns about how significant that problem might be. We have firsthand experience of going to Berryville and buying something at Brashear's to be delivered in Holiday Island. And when Terry looked at our bill, it charged Eureka Springs sales tax, and she had to tell the lady that we don't live in Eureka Springs, and they redid the bill. And it was a lot of money. I don't remember exactly how much, but it was pretty substantial that we were about to pay Eureka Springs sales tax. So that's what we think we're going to get, but only time. I think over time, I think that would be a good number, but initially, until the system flushes itself out, we might not get all of that. Why do we need an urban service district fee when other cities don't? Reason number 2, Holiday Island is atypical, has an atypical fire department cost structure. And I think we went through this in the last presentation. The fire department budgets for cities of 2,500 people typically run $250,000 on the high side versus Holiday Island of $574,000. I think Berryville's fire department budget is under 200,000, and I'm pretty sure that Green Forest is only about 174,000. Green Forest has one fire station, which probably only has an engine and a pumper. That's probably the extent of what they have. We have 4 fire stations, has to be equipped with equipment. Operating budget for the fire department is felt to be justifiable, be more than most cities our size due to how spread out we are, the number of residents requiring more medical assistance, and the difficulty getting volunteers due to most of the population being retired. Although I'd have to say our current chief, our new chief, John Sturdivant, is doing an excellent job of getting volunteers. The current capital reserve, or I shouldn't say the current necessarily this year, but the historical capital reserve to replace fire trucks and maintain the 4 fire stations has historically been inadequate. So what's the next step? The next step would be the petition process. The police department, along with the fire department, would be funded by the monthly urban service district fee added to the water bill. The urban service district can be established by ordinance by the city council upon being presented with a petition from qualified electors or registered voters in Holiday Island. Signatures equaling a minimum of 25% of the Holiday Island electors that voted in the last election for governor is required. That's the minimum required, which is 325 signatures. I'm sure we would want to gather many more signatures than that to really get a feel for the support for this. How do we decide police or deputies? Well, we circulate a petition to form an urban service district to include a police department and a fire department. Signing the petition would constitute a vote for the police department. If the petition fails to get the required signatures, another petition would be circulated to form an urban service district authorizing a new interlocal agreement with the sheriff's department. If neither petition is successful, then the transfer of the fire department to the city would be put on hold because we wouldn't have the source of funding to be able to support it. Do we decide option 2? Another option to how we could make the decision would be to conduct a survey and then proceed with the petition option favored by the survey. That is a way of going. I don't know how successful a survey would be, how many people we would get to respond, but that would be another way of trying to decide which way we want to proceed. Questions, comments? What time is it? How long did that take? Almost
5 minutes
to 10. Okay, so it seemed to go a lot faster than that. I don't mean to keep you here all morning, but do we have any questions or comments? Let's start with any council members or BOC. Let's start with the council members or the BOC members present. Any?
With the calculations of the 10-year plan and the costs, what's not included in it is the projected growth. As the city adds 6 to 10 houses, that's 6 to 10 water meters. That could be 100 houses, 100 water meters by the end of the 10-year period.
Yeah.
So that would help.
That would help.
So, Dave Rocher, I'm chair of the BOC right now. So my initial thoughts are we trying to solve something that's not broken? That's the first thing that comes to my mind, recognizing that the current Board of Commissioners and the City Council and yourself are trying to work on the city, trying to determine revenue streams to fund the service lines that we want to transfer to the city. So my question is are we putting the cart before the horse? We're not a city of the first class. We're not in the shall category established. So could we, I saw you had 2 options. You had the first petition saying, hey, should we have a fire department and a police department, option 1. To me, option 1 should be, we should see if there's a, urban service district with a fire department and keep the current contract until such time as we're required to have it. And required to have a police department, because my personal stance is let's not create more work or uncertainty. We know we being the city must pass a sales tax in some form, or the CID can't dissolve or even transfer anything over. The only thing we're working on, and this is for the rest of the audience, the short term, I don't think I'm getting too far out ahead from some of our public meetings, is the roads. We are working toward a path of transferring the roads and the entire road department sometime around January 1st-ish. And that's a plan. And that's based on last year's city council vote to do the property tax to cover that cost that you would be able to bring in to fund that one service line.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, it seems like we may be creating more of a headache, an unnecessary headache with a lot of uncertainty about what a sales tax can even generate.
Yeah.
Before, and an urban service district fee. I'm not against personally the urban district concept. I think that's a good idea. I just don't know if we need to put the police department first. That's all.
Yeah. First of all, the property tax, 100% of that revenue goes to the roads, because the turnback money we get from the state only covers about half the budget. The other half is going to come from the property tax. The sales tax, part of that sales tax is going to have to cover increased administrative costs that the city is going to pick up as they take over more of the CID responsibility. We have 1 employee right now. There's no way we can take over the roads and the fire department and anything else with 1 employee besides me and volunteers. So that doesn't leave enough money, even from the sales tax revenue, that doesn't leave enough money to operate the fire department. There's got to be another source of revenue besides the sales tax to operate the fire department. Whether we include the sheriff's department, in an urban service district or not, we still need to have that other source of revenue.
So yeah, so I guess that's if I was leaving this meeting, what are the two important takeaways that I would think I would want people to have? That's where my mind is going.
Mhm.
The one is a sales tax, which we need to have that put on the ballot this year, correct, for consideration.
Yeah.
Right. So we're running out.
And well, we're running out of time to get it on the ballot, running out of time to inform people as to.
Right, but I mean, so I think mid-August, right, is when we're supposed to inform the county, is that right?
It's August, late August.
So I guess that's what, so if people, and this is my simple mind going, if people say, I don't ever want to get rid of the suburban improvement district, then you would, then vote no for sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't want to have two forms of government for us, then you should recognize that you need to tax the sales tax. That's where my mind always goes.
Yeah.
The second one is understanding what you presented today about the need for a second revenue stream, which is the urban suburban or protection district. Is that what it's called?
Urban service district.
So those are the two things that I personally take away out of your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have.
Okay.
I would add what's missing from this calculation is a projection of what the BOC would do with the assessment to offset these expenses. You know, and I know they can't make a commitment, but there needs to be some discussion about it.
And
otherwise, people are going to say, no, I'm not going to spend another $900 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good lead in. So again, the roads, I'll just use the roads because that's the only thing that we've talked about even in public sessions of transferring. I don't know if any other BOC members are here, but you know, the question that the district manager and I, the two of us have talked about is January 1st, as we're looking at our 2027 budget, if the goal is to transfer roads to the city and our attorneys are all under, you know, our attorneys are looking at those ways of making that happen right now. If that's a go and we have our first vote to transfer the remaining roads and everything's maybe October-ish, second vote in November, we'll know our budget planning process for 2027. We should, my initial thoughts, and I haven't talked to the rest of the BOC, obviously, my initial thoughts are, why don't we take whatever our operating expenses are, the percentage of our budget for roads, whatever the numbers you've been using, for instance, we take that percentage offset and reduce our next levy based on that the entire service line going over. That's where my mind goes right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's not taken in an inflationary, it may not be the starting point, but what about inflation? We haven't done a levy. So there may be a little bit, it may be not a perfect example, but yeah, if we're getting rid of a service line and the city's taking that over, then absolutely we should lower that levy for the following budget season. So that's, but again, that is just me talking right now. That's not been socialized anywhere other than me and the district manager just brainstorm.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally, I think everybody, you know, assumes, but maybe not trusts that, that as costs go up on one side, they go down on the other side. That's true. And at some point, we probably want to put together a joint, a joint public workshop again, where the district can show their side of it. You know, if this happens, this is what we could do. I was reluctant to put any projections like that in my presentation because I don't have control over it. But if I say it, then, and it doesn't happen, then it'll come back on me and the city that you promised us that this would happen and it didn't. You're all a bunch of, you know what's. So, at some point, I think it would be a good idea.
I'm just one vote, it's just my motion.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't vote for a sales tax unless I knew that there was something offsetting. But I think maybe the most important takeaway from this meeting, I'm hoping, is what level of service do we want for police protection? Some people say, I'm fine with what we have. You know, I don't live on Holiday Island Drive. Nobody speeds past my house. Nobody's ever broken into my house. I feel safe when I'm walking on the streets. I don't need anything more than one deputy showing up out here, 5 days a week. They may say the same thing about the fire department. Nobody needs a fire department until their house is on fire. Nobody needs a police department until there's somebody knocking on their door at 2 o'clock in the morning that looks like they're an unsavory character and they have no reason to be there. There's no broken down car in their driveway or anything. It's just somebody knocking on their door. Or maybe their husband came home drunk and is beating them up. Or maybe they got their bicycle stolen out of their garage. These are all things that actually happen in Holiday Island. Or maybe the people at the door are selling drugs 24/7. And I'm getting tired of people running up and down the road at 3 o'clock in the morning buying drugs from my neighbor. Those aren't hypotheticals. Those are things that are happening every day in Holiday Island. We are a safe community. That is true. Our crime rate compared to a lot of cities is way down there. That doesn't mean we don't have any crime. And we don't want to make ourselves, and this is my biggest fear with continuing with 1 or 1.5 deputies, my biggest fear is that we're going to become a safe haven for criminals, for drug activity and criminal activity. Getting a speeding ticket once in a while on Holiday Island Drive, or somebody getting a speeding ticket on Holiday Island Drive, is a deterrent to speeding on Holiday Island Drive. But the opposite of that is true. Knowing my chances of getting caught are slim to none is a great incentive to disregard the speed limits. And even though how fast people drive down Holiday Island Drive may be somewhat exaggerated, 40 miles an hour to somebody may look like 60 miles an hour. But nevertheless, I can guarantee you 95%, I'd bet a dang good steak dinner that 95 to 98% of the people going down Holiday Island Drive are speeding. And most of them are going 35 miles an hour. Most of them are going 35 miles an hour. They come up the stretch up to the Lutheran church. They're already going 45 and a 35, going through the more rural areas on Holiday Island Drive. They come up over the crest of the hill by the Lutheran church and they slow down a little bit, all the way to 35 instead of 25. And that's why people end up having to dodge cars on, across the street and stuff. So
I hate speed bumps, but I guarantee you, if you put targeted speed bumps on that road, you would not have 35.
Ask your fire chief what he thinks of having. Yeah, we don't want fire trucks and ambulances having to negotiate speed bumps.
And having plows.
Yeah.
Has anybody driven on magnetic roads lately?
What'd you say, sir?
Okay, what do they got on magnetic roads? Radar. They have radar. You ever watch people slam on the brakes when they realize that thing is flashing at them? You want to change behavior, that is a very good way to change behavior.
And we're looking at that.
Less than a police. I'm sorry?
Take a picture of the speed license.
Yes.
Dan, would be interesting to know,
Linda, why don't you stand up?
it would just be interesting to know of all the speeders that we just referenced, how many of them are Holiday Island residents?
Yeah, I don't have that statistic. I don't know.
I have a non-speeding. Now, I come from a town in Orange County, California, different laws, 50,000 people contracted with the deputy sheriff's department because we didn't want to have a police department. One of the reasons we didn't want to have a police department is because of the liability issues associated with it. I noticed you had like a $2,000 insurance plan. Does that include liability insurance? What happens if there's a problem that happens inside this town?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody sues the town. How do we pay for that? What's the insurance associated with the liability associated with this? that's gotta be large. And I'm sure it's included in your numbers.
It isn't in the urban service district numbers, but in the broader picture, that's part of the reason why the administrative costs go up. We would include the insurance cost in the administrative expense. And we are, I think, in prior projections on this, we were looking at about, I don't know, maybe 20,000, 30,000 a year in liability insurance.
Did you ever talk to Eureka Springs Police Department? It's only been the deputies we've seen. So
I have not, and let me,
oh, it's a microphone.
Yeah.
Oh,
I seem to have a couple of slides missing in here that I may not have captured my latest version of this. Yes, we could talk to Eureka Springs about providing police coverage out here. And we will, but.
Only one follow-up on that, and that is, I looked at the code, and I don't know where the code is that says that deputy sheriff's department can't enforce ordinances from a city. I don't know where that is. Maybe if you can help me find that out.
I've checked into that, first of all, the sheriff told me, but when I looked into it, I did find that in the statute somewhere. I don't know where, but it is in the statute.
Well, what about the Eureka Springs Police Department?
Yes, that I believe that they could.
Through an interlocal agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My concern would be that how well we get along with our police coverage from Eureka Springs, how satisfied we would be very dependent on the people, maybe particularly who's the mayor at the time. I just see it fraught with friction between the communities where we're not going to feel like we're getting the coverage we need out here, that they would be taking our money but using it in Eureka Springs. Even if it wasn't true, we would be suspicious of that. And we need to look into it. It could be something that works. I think other cities in Arkansas do that. But that is an option to look at.
One other thing I'd like to point out, Mayor talked about, well, I don't need that, I think I can talk loud enough.
No, it's for the YouTube.
Oh, well, okay, well, I'll get rid of my drill instructor voice. The reason why the sheriff's department has a hard time keeping enough deputies on duty is because they pay lousy. Now, the only people that have any control over what those deputies are paid is the quorum court. And who is the quorum court? People that you are electing. You need to put some pressure on these people if you want that changed. I tell you what, I know from firsthand, I'm not going to tell you what the relationship is, but I have very close ties with the sheriff's department. The vehicles they drive are unsafe a lot of the time. They're worn out. And it doesn't matter whether you go with a police department here or you stay with the sheriff's department. Whatever you do, we are members and residents of Carroll County, and the people that are out there protecting this county deserve better. They deserve to be paid at least as well as a police department in Green Forest, and they're not. So you have a lot of deputies that come in and they get their training with the sheriff's department, and as soon as they are trained and qualified, well, guess where they are? They're at Eureka, they're at Green Forest, there's even sometimes they go to Alpena, but they're not staying with the sheriff's department. So you have a large turnover there because they're not paying a competitive wage, and they've got a lot of territory to cover. Mayor's absolutely right. They have a tremendous. Now, I used to be a train master for the BNSF Railroad. I had 207 miles of road territory. I know what it's like to spend your life behind a windshield all the time and never being home and all these things. And these people need to be paid commensurate with what they're doing, regardless of how we decide to go. And the only people that have control over that is quorum court. And I've let my JP know how I feel about it, but you know, we all need to do that. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Most of your projections appear to be based on, okay, most of your projections appear to be based on 1 to 2 police officers. The way I understand it in these statutes, basically coverage has to be based on 24/7, 365 days a year. Now, I don't know how you're going to sort this out between 2 officers from the county and 1 officer here and whatever. I don't, that's allowed, okay, but you're still basing it on basically 2.5 officers. Well, to cover that kind of coverage here would probably dictate 6 minimum, probably 8 and probably 12 on staff to cover for time off, sick days, just backup, anything like that. So I think your cost projections are way low. One other thing and maybe I misunderstood, you seem to be, I thought you had said you're going to bill the costs of your urban district dues or fees or whatever on the water bill. I don't think you can put it on the water bill unless you own the water department. ICID owns the water department. So you just lost your billing capability. Just putting that out.
Yeah, you can put it on the sewer bill, water bill, or trash bill. But you're right, if we wanted to put it on the water bill, we would have to have the water department. That's part of the long-term planning. That's why this whole process isn't easy. But as far as my projections are concerned, the numbers I put up here are based on 4 full-time officers plus a part-time. And when I look at, cities our size, I mean, there are police departments as small as 3 people. There are police departments in small towns that have 10 or 12, in the department. And it's one of the things that kind of scared me when I first started looking at it, several years ago, is the fact that it seemed to me that a police department was one of those things that just kind of naturally grows, that there's size creep over the years in the size of the police department, because I didn't really understand why some of these small towns needed to have, 6, 7, 8 people in the police department. So that's why I based mine on 4 full-time plus a part-time.
Just as a reference, I believe Green Forest, which is same size as we are approximately, has 12 on theirs.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
They have a sales tax that we can't compare to. Speak up.
Yeah.
I said, and they have a sales tax that we can't come anywhere near getting here. Green Forest has industry, Green Forest has businesses that we don't have here, and we will never have that kind of sales tax to support our services here. And we all need to consider that when we're making these kinds of decisions.
You're absolutely right. This is an option that you can pick and choose how many you want to support, or whether the statutes say you elected to be a city, or you elected to be a town, or whatever, this is what you will comply with. Statutes don't care if you got business or not.
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways of looking at this. You can start out by saying, this is all we want to spend, so we're going to get as much as we can for this much money. Or you can start out by saying, this is what we need, and this is what it costs. Now let's find the revenue to do it. And the law basically instructs us to do the latter, to decide what level of protection of, property and citizens is appropriate for this community, and then, provide it. So that's kind of the approach that I'm making. But with that said, the community is going to have to decide. This isn't my decision to make. I'm just trying to put together a picture of what it would look like if we did choose to go with a police department versus the sheriff's contract. And as far as having, 3 people on the force, or 4 people or 5 people, if you're not gonna have 24/7 coverage, I don't know what you're accomplishing. Right now, we get the coverage we can. It's not 24/7. So if, why would we want to shoot for something in between what we have now, but still far less than 24/7, which would still leave us exposed to having to have a deputy from, that may be sitting in Alpena respond to an emergency in Holiday Island.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the fact that, and kind of like he mentioned over there, the cost and that sort of thing, the people protecting us need to be paid more and that sort of thing. Increase in expenses coming, kind of like you said. How do we compare whether we want the county sheriff or to produce our own city police department if we don't know what the cost may be going forward? We're talking about it going up.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get a bid, if you will, to compare that so we do know what we're faced with between choosing that or a city department?
Yeah, there are still some things that we have to figure out before we would get to the point of doing a petition drive, promoting one particular option. We would have to explore Eureka Springs. What is the chances of us, pairing up with them? What would the cost of that be, even if they are interested in it? How would it even work? Would we have a substation out here where the officers would report out here every morning, or would they report out of the police department in Eureka Springs and stuff like that? There's things to work out with that. There's also an option of increasing, if we want more coverage, negotiating with the county for more coverage, but making a pitch to the county board, or not the county board, but the JPs, that under our contract with the county, you are going to provide us with this many deputies at this cost, and then, hold them to the contract. We work primarily with the sheriff directly when we came up with these contracts. Of course, the JPs had to approve it, but nevertheless, we were dealing with the sheriff directly. Maybe we need to be dealing directly with the JPs and saying that this is a contract between the city and the county. You will live up to your, contract. Just hang on a second. You had a question back there.
I'm just a little confused about the 10-year, we're locked into if we choose one of these plans, we're locked into it for 10 years?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the statute.
Okay, so if we go with the sheriff's department, after 5 years, we can't come back and say, we made a mistake, we want to go with the police department.
It would take a new petition.
We'd have to go through the whole process again.
Yeah.
Pat,
I want to see you run. Are we stuck with one of the two options, or could we have a hybrid option Could we have our own police department with 1 or 1.5 people and then contract for 2 additional for the sheriff to be coordinated somehow? That's kind of a hybrid of the two.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's legal. I'm just asking, you know.
yeah, I don't know if it's legal or not, but I think that cross-jurisdictional
There'd be some coordination issues, yeah.
would be a nightmare to, to manage who's responsible for what and things like that. But there is one other option, and that's why I know, for some reason, I didn't capture my latest version of this presentation, because there's one other option that we need to explore, and that's a marshal. A city of the second class can have a city marshal as opposed to a police department. A city marshal can have deputies. A city marshal within the boundaries of the city has basically the same authority as a sheriff. And so they can basically do everything that a police department would do. And we need to look at that. But the question that would come with that, first of all, if they're going to be investigating crime, arresting criminals, and doing things like that, carrying weapons, high-speed vehicle pursuit, things like that, then your marshal and your deputies are going to have to go through the same police training as a police department would. There are probably some organizational things where police departments may be required to do some things, organizationally and documentationally and stuff like that, that a marshal's office wouldn't have to. But to me, it all comes down to cities that have marshals instead of a police department basically use their marshal to do things like serve warrants. If somebody's not paying their child support, they go after them. They can garnish wages. They can summons people to appear in court and things like that. It's mostly civil, not criminal. And so they don't necessarily need to be carrying a gun and all that kind of stuff. If you want, the full-blown police protection that a sheriff and his deputies, or a police chief and his deputies can provide, then, it's gonna, I think all the options are gonna cost about the same.
Dave Rochford again. So I guess I'm going on a question of timing. So the question was pretty valid on Sid owns the water department.
Mhm.
So there's no plan for transferring the water in the immediate this year.
Right.
So if I
And
saw your slide.
And I may say, there's no plan to transfer the fire department either.
Well, no, but I guess.
This is all what if stuff.
But you say it's what if, but did I see a slide where the contract's coming due? We have to reestablish the
We're
contract.
gonna have to negotiate a new contract.
But that's my point. So
It could be a year-by-year contract, though.
But right, but that gives us, I guess, we're trying to maybe solve an immediate concern here, yes or no. Whereas to me, the immediate concern is we have to renegotiate the current contract, even if it's only a year, which still gives time for more research for the district. And maybe it's a later next year.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, it seems like we're trying to make a really tough decision short on this district, whereas I don't think it's those two options. I think the option one sounds like, because the timing has to be renegotiate the contract.
I'm not proposing today. I'm not superimposing any timeline on this. I'm just saying that this is part of the big picture planning for Holiday Island. And, none of this might happen at all. Or if it does, it might happen in 2028 or whatever time it takes. But if we don't start thinking about it now, then, we may be forced into a decision with no time to plan. And that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Dan, it isn't part of the problem the fact that if we want to take over the fire department in the next year or so, we would have to establish an urban service district to do that, to pay for it. And then it wouldn't be able to encompass a police department because, or you'd have to have another urban service district for the police department because you can't change your 10-year fee for the urban service district except every 10 years. And that fee that we would put in there for the fire department is not big enough to cover a police department at all.
Yeah, I would say that most of what we're looking at here is, a reasonable planning horizon would, by 2028, most of this would be in place. That gives us plenty of time to, answer all the questions, nail down the finances of whatever option we choose. It's time to get some experience on the sales tax so we know what revenue we're going to be working with instead of guessing or, estimating. So, I'm not trying to imply that we have to make a decision on the police department by September or October or something like that.
Yeah, I wanted to add one other thing about the question of whether to go with the police department versus the deputy, the county deputies. The root cause, as I see it, of having issues with getting deputy coverage out here is what Dan said, the turnover in the county and the fact that we only have a county sales tax of 0.5%. I don't know if how many of you know this, but there are only 3 counties out of 75 in the whole state that have a sales tax of 5%. Every other county has 1%, 2%, 0.5%, excuse me. Every other county has 1%, 2%, what have you. That allows them to pay their deputies more. So that is a root cause, and we only have one JP representing us of about, 14 or 12? 11, okay. You would know. Anyway, so, our voice is so small in the county business of getting anything changed in the county. But yet, we need the benefit of them being able to pay deputies more. And it's possibly something we would have to, obviously, if we get our own deputies. But that is why we're not ever going to have coverage out here with deputies that could be needed.
Yeah, I think the county's problem is that, they pay what they pay because they're limited by the amount of revenue they have. And historically, it's been not practically impossible, but impossible to get a countywide sales tax passed. This last sales tax, or the sales tax they have, the 0.5%, I think that was tried at least 6 or 7 times prior to the one that finally passed, and it got voted down every time by the cities, because the cities weren't going to benefit from the county tax. 100% of the county tax money was going to go to the county to build, to construct the jail and operate the police, the sheriff's department, and and dispatch. And the only way they eventually got it to pass was if the cities committed to giving up their share of the sales tax. If the county didn't charge the cities for jailing prisoners and for dispatch. So the cities get those services free in exchange for not getting a share of the county sales tax. So if it was that difficult, and this wasn't that many years ago, that they passed that, finally got the ordinance on the ballot and it passed on the ballot election. So I'm pretty sure that I will never live to see the day when Carroll County has a 1% sales tax. I just don't see it happening unless there is something in it for Berryville and Eureka Springs. You know, that, why would they vote for it otherwise? You know, that I just don't see it. You know, that, to me, that's a check mark on the side of us having our own police department. Whether it be a big department or a small department, you know, it's still a check mark on the side of needing our own police department, not being dependent on the county. And you made a comment before about there possibly being a statute on how large a police department you have to have. Were you raising that issue?
No, I didn't say anything about the size of the police
Oh.
department. I believe in the statute, it says coming with city incorporation, there is a coverage requirement based on the type of city you are. That coverage requirement is going to determine how many you have and whatever. But I don't know anything about.
Yeah, I don't know of any statute that says that you have to have, you know, so many hours of coverage per so many people or something like that. The statute, I read the statute at the first slide. It just says that the city is required to provide the level of police protection that it feels best meets the needs of the citizens. So if the citizens feel like 1.5 deputies is all they need, that's fine. It meets the intent of the law. If the citizens feel like they need more than that, then we need to decide that.
Just one quick question. I've heard rumors that if the lawsuit is lost against ISIS, that we could lose the ability to collect assessments. Is there any truth to that?
I don't know the answer to that, and even if I did, I probably wouldn't say. I don't want to bring, I don't know the answer to it.
Because if we lose the ability to collect assessments, everything you've done for
No, if the SID loses the ability to assess, then that means that everything we're talking about has to be done now, not over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Or your financial projections, everything is toast.
No,
Yeah, it is.
my projections are based on only the city side. That, how long the SID remains viable is strictly a timing issue. Because we're already looking at least on a theoretical basis, what it would take for the city to take over everything over time. The only thing we haven't done is put together a final plan with a timeline superimposed on it. And, the lawsuit could compress that time, it could extend that time out. So, but nobody knows how the lawsuit's gonna end up. That's why
You
they
said
have
that-
courts.
You said property taxes were capped, right, at
Right.
0.05, at 5 mils?
5 mils.
Would that equal $800 per property?
So that,
Would that equal the amount of the assessment?
no,
So then if your property tax is capped and you can't get much from sales tax because we don't have a sales tax base, it all falls apart.
no, that's where the urban service district comes in with its fee
Where
structure.
do you get the money?
Huh?
Where do you get the money?
From the fees that you charge for the urban service district. The fee gets put on the water bill and gets collected just like any other fee.
So it'd be collected like the assessment.
Well, it would be a fee. It would be a fee for the service provided
It
by
would
the
have to
city.
be that much. It'd have to be.
Yes, I mean, in the final analysis, it takes $6 million a year to run Holiday Island.
Right.
You know, if none of that comes from the suburban improvement district long-term, then we have to find that much revenue or we have to do without. And, you know, we may be confronted if people don't want to vote for a sales tax, if people don't want to support an urban service district, then we may be looking at doing without decent roads or doing without a lot of things. So. Any other questions? Yes. Wait for the mic.
We are living in a community that has many differences of wealth. If you drive along Lakeside.
I have artillery ears, you're gonna have to speak
Sorry,
up.
if you drive along Lakeside, the houses look far different from if you drive up in the hills of Holiday Island. Are we really going to make this fee equal for every water bill when there's people who really can't afford $100 a month more every month?
Yeah, we're basically tied to the statutes. You know, the statutes say that it has to be administered equally. It's not a ad valorem tax like a property tax where the more you own, the more tax you pay. This is a fee for service, and it makes the assumption that everybody needs the services provided by the fire department. Everybody needs the services provided by the police department. So everybody has to be billed equally for that. It's the way the statute is written.
I can't fight with this statute, but
Yeah,
I would bet the police are gonna
there's-
spend more time
yeah.
on Holiday Island driving on Lakeside than they will up in the hills.
It's true that somebody that lives in a, you know, $70,000 or $100,000 property may not be able to afford the fee as well as many other people in Holiday Island. However, if you look at the big picture of what we're doing as we transition away from assessment-based revenue to other forms of taxation, you know, they benefit considerably, especially when it comes to property tax. You know, right now, a $50,000 trailer pays the same assessment as $1 million house. That changes radically when you go to ad valorem based property tax. The property tax on that $50,000 or $70,000 trailer goes down to practically nothing, and the taxes on the $1 million house go up, obviously. Right.
That's most of the revenue, not the 5 mils. We're talking about the 5 mils. I agree with you. The more valuable your property, the more you pay. That's fine. But if the fee has to replace the assessment or most of it, it's still a flat tax. And the $70,000 property will pay the same amount as the $1 million property. No change. If that's where most of your revenue, if most of your revenue has to come from fees, and you say it has to be a flat tax.
It's most of the revenue it's all of the revenue for the fire department and whatever police protection we have, which is only part of the overall cost of running the city. So, it's a big chunk, that's for sure, but it's not most. Right now, most of HICID's assessment money does not go to the fire department. A big chunk of it does, but not most of it.
But if we wanted to maintain the community the way it was when we bought here, we want the golf courses, we want the marina, we want the swimming pools. If we want that lifestyle, not a whole lot's gonna change. It's gonna take the $6 million.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's
what
right.
you said. And that's what you said. So And if most of that has to come from a flat tax or a fee that's flat,
Yeah. I
this
mean,
whole lawsuit business is crap. It should be dropped.
yes,
I was wondering, would it be possible to give a comparison of the fee that we're talking about and let us know as homeowners what it's going to be under with all the various sales tax, which I think is a good idea. But here's what you're paying now, and here's what you will be paying if we do these things to improve the quality of life.
I did that in the presentation on the second.
I'm sorry.
Go back and look at the presentation. Yeah, we're gonna have more of these sessions going forward. And at some point, as some of these kind of wild ideas start to coalesce into something more definite, we can put together a more definite picture of what life would be like, life with your checkbook and your pocketbook, 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. We would know how much the assessments could go down every time we do this move and that move and things like that. So, this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to happen overnight. The only thing that really has to happen this year, or everything comes to a screeching halt until we figure out another plan, is the sales tax. And we'll have at least one session before Election Day talking about how the sales tax works, where the money would go, why we think we're going to be able to collect as much money as we do. But if that sales tax doesn't pass, then that's one key component of the revenue that the city would need to take on anything besides the roads. If the sales tax doesn't happen, none of this happens until we come up with a different plan.
How long is it before it goes back on the ballot if we don't get it this time?
Every
4 years?
every 2 years, I believe. You can't call a special election anymore for a sales tax initiative. I think it might be able to go if there's a primary election like next March or something, or April. It might be able to go on that. You just can't call a special election anymore.
I was just wondering if you have any idea what the difference might be
I
between.
can't hear you.
I was just,
That mic only goes into the.
I was just wondering if
internet.
you had any idea what the difference would be between the assessment payments versus the sales tax.
I don't have that in front of me, but, sales tax is gonna be dependent, you mean as far as revenue being generated
No, sir, how much would be paid yearly?
by each individual?
Yes.
It's gonna be dependent on your spending habits.
Those two numbers really don't.
But we will still have
Your
both.
sales tax is how much you spend.
Okay.
And the assessment is fixed.
Yeah. All right, anything else? I'm starting to lose my audience.
I just want to say thank you for the information and keeping the transparency and keeping us informed so that we can move forward. We know we have to move forward. So
Okay.
thank you for that.
It's a lot of work.
It is.
Yeah, you did a good job.
You're welcome. All right, if there's nothing else, I guess we can sign off and,
Yeah.
thanks for coming.
See you next time. That's a wrap.
I don't know what happened, but this latest version of my presentation, and I